Put on your headphones for the best experience. My name is Camilla. I was 19 years old when my entire life changed forever. At that time, I lived with my father in a large house at the edge of the city. The house was beautiful. Tall windows, wide hallways, and a garden my mother used to tend every morning with careful, loving hands. But after she died, the house no longer felt like a home. My mother passed away 3 years earlier. She had been the kindest person I had ever known, the kind of woman who always spoke gently, who put others before herself without thinking twice. She loved me more than I could ever measure, and she adored my father with a quiet devotion that made their love something people admired. When she died, it felt like the light in our house went out. My father tried to stay strong, for me and for himself, but I could see the weight in his eyes. At night, he worked late in his study, pretending to be busy. Sometimes I would walk past the closed door and see him through the gap, sitting completely still, staring at my mother's photograph. He missed her more than he ever said out loud, and I missed her every single day. For 2 years, it was just the two of us in that big, silent house. We tried to support each other, but grief has a way of creating distance, even between people who love each other deeply. We existed side by side, carrying the same loss, but rarely talking about it. Then, one evening, my father told me something I never expected. We were sitting at the dinner table when he looked at me, his expression serious and a little uncertain. "Camilla," he said softly, "I have been thinking about something." I looked up. "What is it, Dad?" He hesitated before speaking again. "I think I may want to marry again." For a moment, I couldn't say anything. The words felt like a shock to my chest. Marry again? My mind immediately filled with anger and confusion. How could he even think about another woman? Didn't my mother mean enough to him? Didn't their love count for anything? But when I looked into my father's tired eyes, I saw something else beneath the loneliness. He had spent 2 years surviving on silence and memories. My father wasn't replacing my mother. He was trying to survive without her. So even though my heart hurt, I stayed quiet. A few weeks later, he introduced me to the woman he wanted to marry. Her name was Sophia. The first time I saw her, I understood why people noticed her immediately. She was beautiful and elegant, with long, dark hair and a calm, confident smile. She worked in my father's company as his secretary. When she spoke to me, her voice was warm and gentle. "Camilla," she said kindly, "your father talks about you all the time." She asked about my school, my hobbies, my future dreams. She listened carefully to everything I said. For a moment, I allowed myself to think, maybe she was a good person. Maybe she could bring happiness back into my father's life. A few months later, they got married. The wedding was small but beautiful. Everyone congratulated my father and said how lucky he was to have such a graceful woman beside him. I tried to believe the same thing. I really did. But deep inside my heart, there was a quiet uneasiness I couldn't explain. Something felt wrong. At first, Sophia treated me kindly. She cooked meals, asked about my day, and sometimes gave me small gifts. When my father was around, she spoke sweetly and smiled warmly, holding my hand and telling people how much she cared about me. My father believed every word. He thought she was an angel who had come to heal our pain. But everything changed the moment he left for work. The first morning after their marriage, my father went to the office early. The moment the front door closed, Sophia's smile disappeared. Her face turned cold. Her voice became sharp. "Camilla," she said firmly. "Yes," I replied nervously. "Clean the living room." I looked at her in confusion. "We have maids," I said quietly. Sophia crossed her arms. "From now on, you will do it." "But why?" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You are not a princess here," she said coldly. "You need to learn how to work." In that moment, I felt something inside my chest sink. The woman who had seemed kind and gentle the night before was suddenly a completely different person. In my own home, I was no longer treated like a daughter. I was treated like a servant. Every day followed the same pattern. When my father was home, Sophia acted like the perfect stepmother, smiling, speaking kindly, pretending to care. But the moment he left, her true face appeared. She ordered me to clean, wash dishes, and do chores the house staff once handled. If I hesitated, her voice became colder. My father had no idea. Every evening when he returned, Sophia would take my hand and ask me sweetly about my day. And my father believed her kindness was real. At night, I sat alone in my room, staring at my mother's photograph, tears falling silently. I wanted to tell my father the truth, but every time I saw him smiling beside Sophia, I stopped myself. He looked happy again, and I didn't want to break his heart for a second time. Then, something even worse began. My father's company started having serious problems. Missed deals, lost contracts, strange financial mistakes. The company's shares began to fall. Important clients suddenly stopped working with them. My father spent longer and longer hours at the office, his face pale with exhaustion. "It doesn't make sense," he muttered one evening, surrounded by documents. "Someone inside the company must be leaking information." Watching him like that hurt me deeply. My father had spent years building that company from nothing. It wasn't just a business to him. It was his life's work. And now someone was destroying it from the inside. At that time, I had no idea how close that someone actually was. One night, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, the hallway lights dim. I walked toward the kitchen to get some water. As I passed Sophia's bedroom, I heard her voice. She was speaking on the phone. At first, I paid no attention, but then I heard something that made me stop. "Yes," she said softly. "I sent the files." My heart skipped a beat. "Don't worry," she continued. "Soon the company will be mine." I froze in the dark hallway, barely breathing. "He trusts me completely," Sophia said with a quiet laugh. "He doesn't know anything." My hands began to tremble. Sophia was the one stealing information from my father's company. She was betraying him. Then, Sophia said something that made my entire world collapse. "He doesn't even know I was the one who poisoned her." The air left my lungs. Poisoned? My mother? My heart felt like it stopped beating. "And soon," she continued calmly, "I will poison him too. Then everything will be mine." I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The woman living in our home had not only betrayed my father, she had murdered my mother. Tears filled my eyes, but I forced myself to stay silent. Slowly, I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it, but I pressed record. Every word of their conversation, every terrible confession. I could not stay silent any longer. For my mother, for my father, I had to be brave. The next day, I followed Sophia. She went to a small cafe across town, where a man I had never seen before was waiting. I hid near the entrance and listened as they spoke quietly. "You did well," the man said. "Soon we will destroy the company completely. Then his wealth will come to us." Sophia smiled slowly. "I already have him wrapped around my finger. After his wife died, he was desperate." She laughed softly. "Poor man." The words felt like knives in my chest. That evening, my father returned home late from the office. He sat in his study, tie loosened, rubbing his forehead. I stood outside the door for a long moment, holding my phone tightly. What I was about to show him would break his heart, but it would also save his life. I knocked gently. "Come in?" I walked inside slowly. He looked up and gave a faint smile. "Camilla, is everything all right?" "Dad, I need to show you something." I walked to his desk and placed my phone in front of him. Then I pressed play. Sophia's voice filled the quiet room. As the recording continued, my father's expression slowly changed. The cafe conversation played clearly, her voice, her laughter, her cruel words. Then came the sentence that shattered everything. "He doesn't even know I was the one who poisoned her." My father's hands began to shake. The recording continued. "Soon, I will poison him, too." By the time the audio ended, the room felt unbearably silent. My father didn't move for several seconds. He simply stared at the phone. Then, slowly, he covered his face with both hands. "Camilla," he whispered. His voice was broken. "All these years, I believed your mother died peacefully. I never knew." His shoulders trembled. My own tears fell as I walked around the desk and held him. For the first time in years, I felt my father cry. "She trusted me," he said quietly, "and I brought her killer into our home." "It's not your fault," I said softly. "She fooled everyone." My father took a slow, deep breath. Then something changed in his eyes. The sadness transformed into determination. He stood up. "No," he said firmly. "We cannot let her destroy this family." That night, we made a plan. My father contacted the police. The officers agreed. They needed to catch Sophia in the act. The next morning, Sophia believed everything was normal. She smiled at my father during breakfast, spoke sweetly as always. But this time, we knew the truth behind her smile. And very soon, that smile was going to disappear forever. Later that afternoon, Sophia went to her room and closed the door. A few minutes later, she picked up her phone. "Yes," she said, her voice calm and confident. "Everything is going according to plan." My father gave a quiet signal. The front door opened. Several police officers stepped inside the house. Sophia continued talking, completely unaware. "Soon the company will collapse, and when he's gone, everything will belong to me." That was the moment. The police entered the room. "Put the phone down," one officer said firmly. Sophia froze. Her eyes widened as she saw the officers standing in front of her. For the first time since she entered our lives, the confident smile disappeared from her face. "What is this?" she demanded. The officer stepped forward. "You are under arrest for corporate espionage, attempted murder, and the poisoning of Mrs. Williams." Sophia's face turned pale. For a moment, she tried to laugh. "This is ridiculous! You must be mistaken." Then my father walked into the room, and behind him stood me. Sophia's eyes moved slowly toward me. The moment she understood what had happened, the sweetness vanished from her face entirely. Only hatred remained. "You," she said quietly, staring at me. "You ruined everything." For a moment, I felt afraid. Then I remembered my mother. and my fear disappeared. I looked directly into Sophia's eyes. "No," I said calmly. "You ruined everything yourself." The officers placed handcuffs on her wrists. As they led her out of the house, the full truth about her crimes began spreading throughout the city. Everyone learned what she had done: poisoned my mother, betrayed my father's company, and planned to destroy our entire family for money. After Sophia was gone, our house felt different. The tension that had filled every room slowly disappeared. For the first time in a long time, the house felt peaceful. My father struggled at first. The betrayal had wounded him deeply. But I stayed by his side through everything. Together, we helped rebuild the company. The employees supported my father because they respected him and believed in his honesty. Little by little, the business began to recover, and our lives slowly found balance again. Sometimes at night, I still sit in the living room beside my mother's photograph. I miss her every day. I wish she were still here. But now I also feel something else: relief. The woman who destroyed her life is gone, and the truth has finally been revealed. One evening, my father sat beside me and took my hand gently. "Camilla," he said softly, "I'm sorry for everything. I should have seen the truth earlier. But you saved me." Tears came to my eyes. "I just did what Mom would have wanted," I said quietly. My father pulled me into a warm hug. For the first time in years, I felt safe again. The house was no longer filled with fear, lies, and secrets. Now it was filled with peace, and with the memory of my mother's love, something no one could ever take away from us. I learned something important from everything that happened. Evil can hide behind a beautiful smile, but in the end, the truth always finds a way to come out. My stepmother tried to take everything from us. In the end, she lost everything instead. Today, I still live with my father in that same big house. It is quiet, but it is peaceful. Every corner of the house reminds me of my mother. Sometimes, when I walk through the garden she once cared for, I feel as if she is watching over us, proud that we protected the family she built. My name is Camilla. I am the daughter of a kind mother and a brave father. And I will never allow anyone to destroy our family again. And so, our story comes to an end for tonight. I hope it brought you peace and a little bit of magic. If you enjoyed this journey, please leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, sleep well and sweet dreams.